Hey everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Manufacturer's top 24 race that was on the other day. It was round number 6, driving the Group 4 cars. So obviously the best drivers so far based by driver rating. This is how round 6 was done. It was based by your drive rating. So pretty much I don't think there would have been anyone under 72k in terms of driver points in this race. And you can see that by the lobby. It was some of the best drivers going right from the start of the grid right the way through to the back of the grid. Obviously, people's positions are pretty much determined by the cars they're driving. That's how these grids are basically made, because everyone in this lobby probably within half a second, I'd say, in terms of overall pace, in pretty much if you're in an equal car. But obviously some cars are stronger than others, so you'll see this grid spread out in weird ways. The SLS, I was reasonably happy with. You see Force starting in P9 there in the SLS, just ahead of myself, starting in P10. Pretty much identical lap times. I think there was under half a tenth between our laps. I didn't quite hook my lap up again. Annoyingly, I missed out on one of my laps that I went for a flying lap. I completely missed a braking as people came out the pits and went into the wall. It distracted me quite badly, but had to just sacrifice that one, and then managed to get one lap in at the end and got myself down to a 0.4, which wasn't bad. I did expect a 0.2, and that's what I was getting in the practice lobbies. So again, wasn't a perfect lap, wasn't anywhere near as good as the lap I did in the Nations race in the Ford, where I hooked that one up and got pole position. But I was actually quite happy with P10. You're in a top 24 race, to be starting in the front half, that's what you want. You can see all the way through the grid, some of the cars like the Citroens that haven't got quite the pace in terms of one lap. However, they're always a worry because of their fuel saving ability. It's one thing I think they need to have a look at in the Group 4 cars. There is big BOP differences that still need to be fixed. There's issues with the way they do the tyre wear for Tigany, for example, with the front wheel drive cars, where they just chew the tyres up because they run such high tyre rates of like ×6 and ×7. They need to have a look at how they do that. And they also really need to have a little look at the fuel rates, obviously, like I said before, with the Citroen and the RCF. And some of the other cars, I think the Veyron's pretty good as well. And but that's obviously can't be a manufacturer's race. And the Cayman's fairly good with the fuel, because some of these cars are just so overpowered with the fuel. I think they need to just lower them a bit, keep them good with the fuel, but just lower them a little bit to make it a little bit more equal. But this race was actually quite funny at the start of the race. I do not know what happened with this lobby at the start. Everything went completely weird. I've only ever seen this happen in private lobbies, about 2 or 3 times I think it's happened. But you'll see that some cars start weaving, Force starts weaving there. Other cars ahead are slowing down, brake lights are going on. I go through Force as if he's a ghost. Actually get myself into P9 under the rolling start, which is really strange. It looks like it was trying to start us like side by side, which would be great. I'd quite like starts like that, but it's not what they wanted to do. Obviously, it was just that the game completely had a little bit of a moment and just didn't know what it was doing. And eventually, everything sorted itself out. Luckily, because sometimes that can be a disaster and getting stuck like that. So luckily, it didn't do it. Straight away, you can see I think Force wanted me to give that position back straight away, but I didn't want to start lifting off too early going into the braking zone for someone to wipe me out going into a corner. And then the situation was, if I lift now, I've got so many cars behind Force. How do I slot into that gap? I didn't think it was fair for myself to risk losing 2 or 3 places through the game's 4. So I just carried on to see if I could make any progress. Got a massive slipstream off the NSX. The NSX slipstream I was getting a really strong slipstream off. You can see, decided to make a move down the inside. Couldn't go for that. Favaris cut Afo off slightly, and then Afo had to brake, and I actually came into contact with Afo, but that wasn't really Afo's fault. It wasn't Favaris' fault either. It was just a racing incident where Favaris was just covering his line into that corner, and I just obviously went into the back of RC Afo. But that gave Force back the position anyway, and I didn't lose enough position, so back to pretty much how it should be. If I would have been able to give the position back without losing places, I think I would have tried to do it, but it was too risky. I wasn't willing to risk 2 places or 3 places due to a problem with the game. And there was other drivers up ahead that also gained places that shouldn't have, and that didn't give it back either. So can't really expect people to do that when it's an issue that they need to really fix these bugs, because this is a top 24 race, and we don't want bugs like that in these races, because Stuff like that has happened before in private lobbies, and it completely fails the lobby. Everyone just gets stuck behind the car, and sometimes you get stuck in auto drive, and I was actually dreading that that's what could have happened, but luckily it fixed itself and the race got underway. You can see still in P10. Now in this situation, you can see, have a little look at RC Afo's internet bar. He was on a one bar red bar, which is not what you want to see in any race, so this kind of worried me. So to be honest, at this stage I just wanted to stay about half a second away from Force in front of me, because I felt if you got too close to RC Afo with the lag spikes that he could get, it could literally wipe you out of the race, and it was very risky. I didn't want to be getting that close to a car with one bar. Obviously got some sort of internet issues. I really wish that they'd have some sort of minimum ping requirement for these races, where if someone is on a setting like that, they should really be. This is nothing against RC Afo, because all that stuff in the past is gone now, and we race fair with each other. But I don't want to be racing someone with a one bar. I would rather, if someone's got a one bar, they're disconnected from the race, because it's dangerous. It's a chance that you could ruin other people's race because of a lag spike, and that's why you can see me holding back at the moment, just short shifting. I could have got closer to Force if I would have revved out a bit, got into his slipstream more, and then give myself more of an ability to save fuel. But because of that one bar, it just totally put me off it. I didn't want to go near it at this stage of the race. I wanted to see how Afo's car was for at least 3 or 4 laps to see if it was stable, because sometimes the one bar can be reasonably stable on the car, but sometimes it can be all over the place. At the moment it looks reasonably stable, so staying with Force and just trying to stay in the slipstream. I did notice though, on that start when I made a move on Force, I got such a strong slipstream off the NSX, whereas when I was behind the SLS, the slipstream was nowhere near as good. As contact between the cars in front, so I'm just going to stay behind and see how this progresses up the hill. As you can see, they're doing quite massive short shifting, just because there's no point me trying to get myself free wide with these going into these corners, as it's very risky, you know, trying to go more than 2 cars, even 1-2 cars wide through there. It's dangerous. So Jomis has a little look up the inside, too far back. I closed the door on that one because there's no way he was coming through there. I shut the door on that one, and just got myself back into the slipstream of Force, and just trying to concentrate on keeping things smooth. We're only on lap 2. There's no point to make any silly decisions in trying to make a move. That's why I backed out the move on RC Afo as well. I backed out the move early because I thought it's just not. If I would have been about half a car length further up, I could have possibly made that move and got past Favaris as well, which would have been a dream start. But unfortunately, I decided to back out of that one because I didn't want to ruin anyone's race, and also ruin my own race. You know, lap 1, there's no need to make moves like that. But you can see everyone very close already. You know, starting lap 3, I think it is now, and look at the field. It's like a train going through. This is the top drivers. This is what, you know, like a real race. Everyone's staying within each other's slipstream, trying to make progress, trying to keep it smooth. You can see some of the cars that will drop off after lap 3 or 4 with the 4-wheel drives, and the front-wheel drive cars start to struggle, and that's when you'll see gaps starting to develop in between different cars. As you see the NSX up front, obviously I know what Afo does in races. He done it in Brands Hatch in the Group 3 races. He tends to save a lot of fuel during the first stint, and then he puts more fuel in, then he drives aggressively, because the fuel saving that he does gives him the ability to then just drive, obviously in clean air, because he comes out so far ahead of people. The NSX is able to do that strategy along with the Citroen and the RCF, and that's why you find a lot of them drivers tend to do it. Even when they're not the cars are not the strongest at tracks, their fuel consumption brings them back into races a lot of the time in them cars. As you can see now, pushing reasonably, you see the gap between myself and Force. It's around half second, 0.6 of a second. It's a gap I was just trying to maintain, that I was still in the slipstream. I didn't want to lose the slipstream, but I didn't want to get too close, which kind of affected my ability to save fuel. But I felt it was a safer option with Afo's red bar up front. I didn't want any situations occurring where, you know, I'd get wiped out from something of a lag spike and put down to last place. I wanted to just get some solid points in this race and keep it clean. As you can see, Favaris there in P7 was obviously going to start struggling as well. 4-wheel drive car. I knew that the GTR started to kill its tyres after lap 4 or 5. I'd done a practice race with one of the American drivers in the GTR, and his car started to just lose all grip on lap 4 or 5. He did manage to hang it out till lap 7, but he was losing so much time. I was all over the rear of his car and ended up getting past him because of the understeer that he was getting. As you can see already, look at the gap that Afo is starting to catch up now to Favaris. Favaris is doing a good job though still at this stage. He's not losing too much time to that Megane up front, which I expected the Megane to be a bit better here. I know it's been BOP'd quite a lot. I think the weight has affected it in the race a lot more than it has done during the qualifying, because during the race it doesn't seem as strong. You know, if we would have gone back 2 or 3 patches, the Megane would have dominated this track. Its handling and everything would have just took effect and it would have been at the front, but it's not as dominant now. You know, the Megane just up front's doing a good job in P5 there. I think that's about where it should have been. The other Megane was way down in something like P17 or something like that. So it does show you that obviously the driver had to get the most out of the car also, because the grid was so close in terms of qualifying. You know, 2-3 attempts could be 5-6 positions at least, even on a long track like this. As you can see, still managing to hold on to that slipstream in front, just staying within 5-6 tenths of force, not risking anything. We're getting close to the pit stop here. Obviously lap 7 was going to be a direct split in the middle because it's 14 laps, so one sub strategy, the only way you could really do this was lap 7. You could undercut it in certain cars like the NSX or Citroen if you wanted to, get quite a good undercut by obviously the fuel saving you can do in them cars. But for myself, Force and other cars, it's always going to be a lap 7 pit stop race for our cars. Also the GTR also probably needed to do that because of its tyres struggling so much. He was probably having to rev that car out a little bit more than he would have liked on the straights. So far this race has been going fairly smoothly, not made any real massive mistakes and keeping it consistent. That's what the aim was going into this top 24 race. Obviously try and keep it consistent. You can see the gap developing now between Favaris and that Megane. The Megane obviously very good on its tyres, and now Favaris is starting to struggle, and this is the time where I thought I need to maybe consider trying to see if I can make some progress, because I felt like if Favaris was going to struggle, I wanted to get past him and start seeing if I can maybe get past Force if there was an opportunity. But obviously I needed to wait for an opportunity. There's no point just lunging one up the inside and everyone losing out. Obviously Joe was behind in that Jaguar. I didn't want to come into a situation where we're battling that much that he ends up catching on to the back end of this battle. So now in P10, obviously just looking now to see if I can find any sort of gaps or any sort of battling going on. I knew that the battling would start happening because Afo's starting to catch up for Favaris. That means that Force is going to catch up Afo, and that means I'm going to then catch up obviously Force. So this is where we need to be very clinical in any moves that I make. I need to make sure that I do them cleanly and try and make progress before the pit stop phase. If I can get in front of Force before the pits, that would be really beneficial for myself. Obviously Force is my main competitor in the FIA manufacturers. I do also need him to get good results also, but this is a top 24 race, so I need to try and make sure I finish ahead of him. As you can see, the battling has started, so I decided to stay over to the left hand side, then try and see if I can get a strong exit from this corner if they start battling. As you can see, they've started battling. I've managed to get on the outside of Force now and getting this little bit of slipstream off RCFO somehow going up the hill, putting me side by side with Forces. We're going to go 2x2, but it looks like I've got the inside line, so he's going to have to back off from that because you can't go 2x2 through that corner. It's too dangerous. As you see, RCFO have a massive lag spike in front of me, and this is the reason why I didn't want to get too close to him. Just look at his car moving around, flicking around, and that doesn't fill me with confidence. So I kind of wanted to get past him, but I felt unsafe in doing so. So you're going to see I'm just going to hang behind him now. I've got ahead of Force, but obviously I felt like Force would have, I pretty much knew Force would have a bit more fuel than me going into the pits because he was a little bit closer to Afo and was probably able to do a little bit more short shift. And then straight away I can see the difference in the slipstream that I get off of RC Afo compared to when I was behind Force with him in the SLS. It was a much stronger slipstream because obviously the NSX isn't quite as powerful as the SLS. The SLS just picked up a better slipstream, and this enabled me then to start getting a little bit closer to RCFO as he's starting to put Favaris under pressure, and Favaris at this stage is really starting to struggle. This was where I was wondering what cars might try and do the undercut, because obviously if cars can do it in the fuel like the NSX, I knew that the NSX is very strong on its fuel, so I was wondering if Afo would decide to pit at the end of this lap. I can't do it, I haven't got the fuel to do it. I probably should have been doing more fuel saving, and maybe one error I did was not driving too close to Force at the start. Maybe I should have revved out a little bit more and got in that slipstream and then did a lot of fuel saving, but I chose to stay away from Arciafo's car because it just looked dangerous with the connection he had, as now Favaris really struggling through these fast corners. This is where Favaris is going to have issues. Four-wheel drive, fast corners, understeer is what he's going to get, and now we need to see if we can get past Favaris, as Afo has a little look. He's got the slipstream, I've got the slipstream with Afo. I'm going to pull out to have a little look to see if I can make a move, and we both pretty much go at the same time. And I think that was more of a defensive move by Arciafo, which was fair enough. Nothing wrong with that. He obviously defensive and attacking at the same time, as Favaris struggles for grip on the exit and just can't get on the power. I'm going to try and go around the same type of move that I did to Force, but I haven't got the car far enough ahead. Look at the lag spikes on that NSX. It just doesn't fulfill you with much confidence, so I decided to back out of that. There was no way I was risking getting punted off, because if it lag spikes side by side like that, it could knock you off the track very easily. So I decided to stay way away from that and just see what happens, whether Afo would go in the pits on this lap. I did expect him to go in the pits here, because he's clearly getting held up by Favaris, who's really struggling with them tyres. As you can see straight away, I could see by the line that Afo took for that corner, he was going in the pits, and he goes in the pits with a massive amount of fuel compared to myself, a lot more. He's actually got about 6-7% more fuel than myself, not as much as I expected. I expected that NSX to have a little bit more than that, but he's obviously got enough just about to do to do 8 laps on his next stint. It can clearly do that. But the SLS obviously behind me, driven by Force, starting to put myself under pressure, obviously, as I had to back out that corner a bit, because Favaris was struggling with traction so much. I had to get off the power a little bit, and now I need to pick up that slipstream again and see if I can make a move on Favaris somewhere. As we're going to move to the replay cameras now, as we watch the battle going through to the final stage of this first stint. Obviously, this is where we're going to be pitting at the end of lap 7, and one thing I really wanted to do was see if I could get past Favaris before the pits, and then see if I could get Force stuck behind him. A strategy that I thought I've got to try and do, because if I can lose Force maybe a second or so in the pits, if he's saved a bit more fuel than myself, it will equal itself out with that extra second that I go in the pits. So you can see, really being aggressive through the fast section. That's where I knew Favaris was struggling. The Mercedes still fairly strong through there. You can see the slipstream I'm getting. I've managed to get right up the rear gearbox of that Nissan GTR. I'm going to pull out and go for that move on the inside. Managed to get alongside and got the inside line now. I've just got to make sure I get the braking spot perfect and give Favaris space on the outside. So a nice clean overtake, and that puts me up one position, and now Force is stuck behind that Nissan GTR, which is a perfect situation for me at this stage. We now ride on board, and you can see Force trying to go on the inside there, not able to do that. The car is cut. Obviously the SLS isn't quite as strong as the GTR on straight line speed. Then going into the braking zone, trying to see if I can now push a little bit harder, revving the car out a little bit more, using up a little bit more fuel than I probably would have liked. I wanted to get a gap going into pits, but Force has managed to make a really important move going into that final corner there before we go into the pits, the second to last corner. That was a great move by Force, and that gives him the ability to not get held up, because if he was held up now, he'd be, look how much of a gap he's already got to Favaris, so it shows you how much time he would have lost. Going into the pits, you can see Force has got 6% more fuel than myself, and I'm now going to be in a situation, I think it was actually about 7% more fuel than myself. So that wasn't a massive amount though. So I've just got to make sure I put enough fuel in to drive a little bit more aggressively in the second stint. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, whether I was going to try and undercut or go over it. I wasn't really sure. I wish they'd show you a map in the top right hand corner so you could see where other cars were. I did underfuel a little bit, but not massively. And unfortunately, you see Force comes out just a bit ahead. And unfortunately for myself, he comes out ahead of all this traffic, and I've come right out into the middle of mayhem, and this was a disaster. I'm going to show you why that was, and it wasn't really because of the fuel saving. Force had about 6-7% more fuel going in the pits. However, he underfueled massively in the pits. I mean, he must have checked out the map before he went in it. I did not check out the map, which was a fault of my own, and something I now need to make sure I do before I go in the pits, because I didn't look at the map. I just went in the pits, tried to underfuel a little bit, but I wanted to have fuel to drive aggressively. But look at the difference this has made. He's now so many cars up ahead, and he's given himself such a strong advantage now going through to the end of the race. I'm going to show you at the end of the race a screenshot comparison of the fuel as we come out of the pits, just to show you how much more fuel I put in the car compared to Force. And that's why we came out the pits as we did. I think if I would have done a similar type of fuel as him, I would have come out right behind Force and would have just got out ahead of all this mayhem. But now I need to find a way through this carnage up ahead, pretty much led by Tidgney in his understeering Peugeot there. So Oscar Manson actually makes a move on Tidgney, gets himself past, but then Tidgney does the undercut in that Peugeot that's so fast down the straight and actually manages to get back past. So this is not the situation I wanted. Obviously I wanted people to be getting past so I could start getting my way past, and you can see obviously behind me M Thomas 94 driving that Ferrari, obviously in the same situation as myself, stuck in this traffic of cars that are doing 2 stops, cars that are doing 1 stop but struggling on the tyres. And this was really frustrating because this isn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to be ahead of this, and I was frustrated that I didn't underfuel more. Obviously if I could go back, I would love to have gone back and just put less fuel in, got out at the same time as Force and had a battle with Force and Derek, because that's where I should have really been. But I tried to be aggressive by putting more fuel in, and this is one of the reasons why. I've said it to a few people before in the comments. People always question, why don't you put more fuel in the pits and be more aggressive? And this is your perfect answer to that. I decided to go aggressive, put in pretty much the fuel that I need to get to the end instead of undercutting my fuel, and I've come out in just traffic everywhere. So I need to try and get past these drivers as fast as possible. But already at this stage it's been a lap already, over a lap now, driving behind them, and I've lost out on probably about a second and a half. And I need to find a way. You can see myself getting really impatient. I'm looking at gaps. I need to find a way past. Obviously as well, Oscar Manson there in P11 looking to find the way past Tidgney. Tidgney is struggling massively with his tyres at this stage, and we all need to find the way past as soon as possible. As I could see this developing now, cars were starting to make moves, and so I decided to try and take a tight line here. It took too much of a tight line, nearly lost the rear, managed to save it. That gave me a gap though that I could then get on the power and leave the throttle all the way down. And I started getting a really big slipstream, and I could see, I was looking for a gap all the time, and I could see a little gap in front of me. I decided to go for a gap in between 2 cars, and a nice move straight in there, gaining myself 2 positions and getting myself importantly past Tidgney and M Thomas obviously as well, looking to go past Tidgney on that right hand side. You can see him in the top right hand corner on the replay camera, manages to make that move as well. I nearly managed to get past Oscar Manson as well. Unfortunately I had to give him space, and he stays out in front. But now I've got the slipstream of Oscar Manson, and we can start putting some better lap times in now. But already look at the gap that Force has built up in that SLS to ourselves in the space of just a lap and a half. So a big loss there. So now we need to just concentrate and try and push. But now we're going to start battling with Oscar Manson, which is probably going to end up losing us lap time as well, as we just try and fight for this P10. M Thomas also behind us, trying to stay with us. I think that possibly he's gone into the pits earlier to try and do the undercut, and obviously that traffic has caught him out as well and probably messed up his strategy as well. But he's managing to stay with us at the moment, and I'm just trying to stay in the slipstream of Oscar Manson. And if I find an opportunity or see an opportunity to make a move somewhere, I'm going to obviously go for it. I wanted to get that P10. I wanted to finish where I started, at least in this race. So wanted to push Manson as hard as I could. I didn't know what his fuel would be like. I do know that obviously the Citroen's the best car in terms of fuel. I don't think there's a car better on fuel than the Citroen. You just half shift that car, and it keeps its speed down the straight. You can see what he's actually short shifting at the moment and still maintaining that speed, because you just half shift it. It doesn't really lose any acceleration, and it's just really good at fuel saving when you do that. But already we're managing to close in on that gap to the front driver, to the SLS and the Scirocco driven by Derek. So at the moment I felt like there was a possibility of catching them up, but the issue was going to happen when I start driving aggressively and trying to battle with Oscar Manson. So I actually picked up a penalty there for the slightest corner cut. I knew I'd done it. I turned in too early, trying to be aggressive to pick up the slipstream. That was my fault. A deserved penalty, and 1.5 second penalty I think it is. So not massive, but it could be really important, because looking how close this battling is, a 1 second penalty could be the difference between 1 or 2 places. So really wanted to start pushing now and see if I could find a way past Oscar Manson and get myself into P10. As you can see, looking on that TV replay camera, how close the racing still is, all the way up to and we've been driving for over 20 minutes now, 22 minutes, and the racing is really close. You can see 6 or 7 cars within about 3 or 4 seconds, I'd say, of each other. and really driving hard, trying to get a good result in this top 24 race. This is going to be really important now. If I can try and find a way past Oscar and Manson and get myself into P10 and then maybe get some clean air and try and put some better lap times in. I knew I had reasonable fuel to get to the end because I obviously made sure I'd give myself that by not undercutting the fuel in the pit stop, which maybe I should have done. Well, it's pretty much obvious I should have done that, and I did regret it after, especially when I saw the screenshot that I'm going to show you at the end of the race. We're going to go through all the highlights at the end of the race from all the instances. There's quite a lot to go through. Quite a lot of overtakes, especially that nice move I did on Tidgeney. I really liked that moment going through the middle. It was a great move, and it felt nice getting past them as well after being stuck behind them for a lap and a half. But now keeping it clean and just trying to find any sort of opportunity I was trying to work out where the opportunity was to get past this Citroen. The Citroen was just so fast on the straights. I felt like the only real opportunity is going to be going into the hairpin. I felt like my car was fairly good through the fast corners before that hairpin, and then I was able to get really good slipstream because I was quite good through that corner going up the hill. I felt that this was my opportunity to, where I was going to be able to make a move was probably going to be going into the hairpin, because I took quite a narrow line into that corner. I took quite a sharp line, which then it was an aggressive line, but it gave me the ability to get on the power very early through this corner. I just ran the risk of running wide on that final part, but it was the line I've been running from the start of practice. It was a little bit different to other drivers, but it really is interesting when you see different drivers doing different moves. We run on board now as I'm picking up a big slipstream, but I've decided to just go back to the left hand side. I'm not going to try and make a move there. I'm a bit too far back. No point battling too much and losing too much time at this stage. We've still got over 3 laps to go. I don't want to start making silly moves and losing us both times while we're still gaining on Derek and Force in front as well. It's best if we just, if a move's a little bit more on, then I'll go for it. You can see again, not going to make him start looking up the inside there, because there's no point us losing time at this phase. You can see that Jonas is starting to gain a little bit now. It looks like he's pushing that Jag a little bit harder. We're maintaining the gap about 1.5, 1.6 seconds though, so doing a good job between myself and P10 in pulling that gap to Jonas. But when we start battling, that's when Jonas is going to be able to start gaining, because as soon as you start battling on GT Sport, as Manson decides to try and break the slipstream, I'm going to go over to the left hand side to pick it up, because I need to pick that slipstream up to try and make sure that I don't lose him down the straights. As that Citroen surprises me just how fast it is on the straights. I have raced it before. You don't realise just how fast it is until you're behind it. It's a hard car to overtake, and I was quite surprised he didn't get past Tidgeney sooner than he did, unless it was because he didn't want to burn up his fuel. That's possibly why. Not 100% sure though, but you can see in front, Derek and Force, they're definitely getting nearer to ourselves as we come to the end of the race. So this is frustrating because it shows that I clearly had the pace. I think my race pace and Force's race pace were pretty much identical in the two SLSs. There wasn't much difference. He just made a better strategy call in the pits, a very good strategy call in the pits, and a very good overtake on Favaris that put himself into a position that he wouldn't get stuck behind that traffic, because without that move on Favaris, it's very likely that he would have got stuck in the traffic also. So it shows you the difference these moves can make in a race situation. As again, picking up a massive slipstream now from that Citroen. You can see the difference in speed, picking up to 130 miles per hour nearly. I've got a big slipstream. I'm going to have a little look. I go to the right hand side. I'm going to do a dummy and see if I can make a dummy work. Look to the left. He goes to block that left hand side. So I go to the right, but then he tries to cover the right off as well. I wasn't sure if that was a bit too aggressive, but this is getting really close now and heated. I want to get past him. You can see Jonas is starting to gain now. This is what I was talking about. If I'd managed to save the fuel to a point where I could push for the last 2 laps, so I decided this was where I was going to just try and make a move. So again, getting in that slipstream, I'm going to go to the left hand side. He goes to block that, then I go to the right, he blocks that, and this is getting a little bit verging on multiple defences, but it's great racing and it's enjoyable. I decided to have a little look up the inside of him. I could have gone for that, but I decided to back out. Maybe I do need to be, I've heard people say I need to be more aggressive, and the problem is, though, I didn't want to wipe him out and I didn't want to wreck my race, and then Jonas goes past us. So I decided to back out of that one. I think I could have gone for that and made that move mine, because I was on the inside. I did have more than a quarter of my car alongside him, so the move was on, but I decided to back out of it and just keep the P11. But some really intense racing going into the last few laps here. I'm doing my best to see if I can get past Oscar Manson, but this is losing us both time. Look how much Jonas has caught up already. He's in the slipstream there, under a second behind, and that shows you it's gone from 1.7 seconds to under 1 second just because of a few corners of battling. And this is why you've got to be so tactical with your moves. You know, I decided that was going to be my chance of an overtake, and I went for it, and that's why I held off, because if it fails, look how close Jonas is now, and this is going to be really close all the way to the end of this race. Great racing though, enjoyable race all the way from the start. Really, I really did enjoy this race. Not been particularly the best result for myself, you know, in P10, 11, but I think a lot of that was caused by the pit stop disaster. Obviously, coming out the pits behind the pug trainers, I think Tijani called it. Just getting stuck behind that front wheel drive car was pretty much a nightmare situation. But now I decided to get really aggressive on there to see if I could pick up the slipstream again, and ran too far wide, and that was my mistake. I risked it. I just decided it was worth a risk to try and get up a massive slipstream, and luckily I managed to just stay off the power and just about keep that car on the track. That was quite a good save, I have to say, because if I would have put any sort of power into that corner, the car would have understeered and hit the barrier, and I managed to hold on to P11. So now I've just got to try and hold on to this position to the finishing line, and that's pretty much all I can do, because I knew Jonas hadn't got a penalty, so he was going to jump me. So a little bit of a mistake by myself. Maybe I should have just settled for a P11 and stayed in Oscaro's slipstream and then got rid of my penalty and kept P11, but I really wanted to get past Oscaro Manson and see if I could make a little gap and try and see if I could get rid of that penalty. It's just the racer in me. I wanted to try and make a move, and it failed, and I ended up putting myself in more of a situation now of getting overtaken by P12. But luckily it looks like Jonas hasn't really got the legs on that Jaguar. It looks like I think he's having to do some fuel saving now, maybe use up some of his fuel or undercut the fuel in the pits like the SLS did, driven by Force. So he's probably might not have the fuel to push as hard as I have. You can see my fuel's okay. I've got 1 lap of fuel left, no real issues with the fuel. I can drive reasonably aggressive. I've just got to short shift a bit, because obviously it averages out how you've driven it throughout the race, so I can push reasonably hard all the way to the end now. You can see I've actually just about started to close back in on Manson there, as I did get it. It was nearly on 2 seconds a gap, but I've got it back down to 1.4 seconds as I run wide there, going out that corner, trying to get on the power as early as I could to try and build up a gap to P12. I tried my best to see if I could build the gap up so I can get rid of that penalty before the finishing line, but it looks like he's in my slipstream there as he runs a little bit wide, and that gives me the opportunity to get up to over 6 tenths a gap and then going through these corners that I really do like. It's just a shame that I tried too hard to get on the power, and I actually turned in. If you go back and watch, we'll have a little look on the highlights. I turned in twice for that corner. I turned in too early, which would have got me a penalty, so I backed out of it, and then that led to me understeering wide. But this time the final lap pretty much hooked it up perfectly and increased the gap to 8 tenths, but then he's going to start gaining on me on the slipstream, but managed to keep the pace to Oscaro Manson even when not in his slipstream. You can see 1.6, 1.7 seconds, so fairly evenly matched. So I think even if I would have got past the Citroen, he would have then been all over me in the slipstream, the same as I was with him. So I don't think there was I don't think I would have been able to pull away from him, but I did want to try and get that position on the track and then try and get rid of the penalty at the end, as you never know what could happen. You know, someone could have made a mistake, but it's not to be. Still in P12 now, and P11, sorry, coming to the finishing line, and now I've got to get rid of this penalty at the finishing line. It's 1.6 seconds. I know that Jonas is pretty much going to be able to overtake me at the finishing line, and I didn't want to risk going over the line with any sort of penalty where I try and lose it, so I braked fairly early. I think I could have braked a little bit later. What I did was I braked a little bit too early at this stage to get rid of the penalty. I should have done it closer to the line and try and maintain the position, but did it too early and then went over the line and ended up with P12. So not a brilliant result. Came out with over 2,000 points, obviously with the times 1.2 points, but not the result that I really wanted. Obviously Force picking up some good points as there in the SLS. I think it was like 2,800, but luckily not too much that I can't catch it up. And I think overall, obviously I'm still in the better position overall in the title, still in P1 in the manufacturers. And this is the highlights. We're going to go through the highlights. Lap 1, this was the move I made as I got quite a big slipstream off RC Afo, and I could have thrown that up there on the inside, but I decided it's lap 1, I'm not going to do that. And then Favaris gives Afo a little tap that then taps Afo into myself, and Force goes around the outside and takes that position back. This was then the move going into the hairpin. As you can see, they were battling away, there was contact. I then got a really good run out of the corner, kept space on the left hand side so I could go around the outside, got alongside Force, and managed to get myself long side. Then at this point now he has to give that position up because you can't go side by side through there, you're going to end up coming into contact. So I managed to get myself into P9 before the pit stop phase. So at this stage of the race everything was going really well, and then I started to put RCFO under pressure. Unfortunately defended that really well, couldn't really do much, but then them two nearly came into contact. I then get on the power, and I think I might have tapped AFO there on the rear of his car, but this was where his lag started to kick in, and it did start to worry me. His car was going backwards, forwards, side by side, and it's not a situation you want to see a car doing when you're trying to overtake it. So I decided to back out of that and just hang on behind him until he pitted, and then I went for the move on TRL for Varos, going into the hairpin, managed to get a good slipstream, got alongside the inside. He didn't fight it, he let me go there I think pretty much, which was nice driving. He wasn't going to fight it, had the inside line, and then he can pick up my slipstream on this uphill section. Then we're going to have a little look behind us. This was the real important move that Force made as we went up the hill. He didn't manage to get past in this stage of the lap, but then just before the pits, obviously as we go through to the second to last corner, you see if he would have stayed behind them I think to the pits, he would have been in a pretty bad situation along with myself. But he had a little look on the inside there, managed to get it through, and that was important for him. That them give him the advantage coming out there. Otherwise he would have been at least where Oscar Manson was and stuck in traffic, which would have been ideal for myself. But fortunately, look at that, he pretty much came out the pits in the perfect situation, and it wasn't to be. Now this was the fuel, this was as we came out the fuel. Look at Force's fuel compared to mine. I put so much more fuel in, probably about 10% more fuel I think it is. Looking at that as you go back to his, and it shows you what can be the difference between gaining 3 or 4 places if you just risk something. And maybe I need to start doing more risks like this in these top 24 races. I played it too safe. I tried to be a bit more aggressive in terms of the driving that I could do, but at least I managed to get this overtake done anyway when they were all fighting away. I saw the gap there, went for it and thought I'm coming through whether you like it or not, and managed to squeeze myself through. I think I took Tidgeny by surprise, and then I've tried to go around the outside of Oscar Manson, which was always going to be hard. Braked as late as I could, gave him space on the inside. He gave me space also on the exit, which was nice to see, but just couldn't get around the outside there and ended up to stay in P11. Now, as you can see, this was a move now, looking on board Tidgeny's view, looking back at myself. You can see I had a massive moment on the first part of that fast chicane, but managed to hold it together, get on the pile nice and early, and then the gap just opened up for me, a big gap. I've seen it opening up. You can see it now starting to develop. I saw it there, went for it, and just got in between them and managed to get that important move made. And M. Thomas saw that as well and decided to go for the right hand side and managed to get alongside Tidgeny as well on the right hand side. You see, braked late, got himself into that P12, and that was another move made by M. Thomas as well. Nice move. This was the defensive driving, I think, going into this corner. You see I picked up the slipstream, I faked to move to the left, he went to block it and then went back over. I then had to scrape along the walls. I had to get out of that. Kind of a double defence, but it wasn't a massive one because of the way he didn't fully commit to the defence on the second part, so that wasn't too bad. This one I'm not too sure. This was quite aggressive defensive because defensive driving, because you'll have a little look as I go to the left hand side there, which he then goes to cover it, and then he goes back over to the right. Again, kind of a lot of weaving, but it was good fun and it was good battling all the way to the finish. As I then had a little look up the inside, I think I could have gone for that. You can see there I backed out of it and gave him the space. There was a little tiny bit of contact there, but because I backed out of it, no one came any loss of that. So this is the onboard of the action when the double defence. Now have a little look at the steering inputs. It was very minimal. He went to defend then and then went back over, so kind of a double defence. It nearly caught me out, and luckily managed to keep the car on the track and didn't come into any sort of incident. And then going up the hill, you're going to see again, this was the you can see the inputs that go in when he kind of double defends again, but it wasn't so bad that it wasn't Max Verstappen double defending. Like you can see, he goes to the right side, but then he goes to the left, and then it's just kind of little movement. It's nothing massive. It's actually quite good defending, that I'll give him that. I think that was just fair, but aggressive but fair defending. And so no real hard feelings there, as I tried to make a move up the inside and decided to back out of it. So really fun driving all the way to the end. And then this was my silly mistake where I tried to get on the power early. You can see I tried to take this aggressively to make one final move, and I turned in too early there and had to back out of it. You could see it, and then that meant I ran wide out of that corner, managed to hold on to the car and just avoided running wide there. that's where the if I would have ran wide there, it could have been a disaster. But managed to hold on to P11 and then lost obviously P11 at the finishing line. So a really fun race. Hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. There's going to be more of these top 24 races to come. Hopefully another 2. And that should be a bit better for myself. Obviously, that isn't my favourite track, but there's 2 tracks I really enjoy coming up, so I'm really looking forward to them. Monza, I'm not too sure how strong the AMG will be, but it should be okay. Hopefully, I can get a top 10 in that and get some more solid points. And hopefully, I think the last race is the most important one. The Interlagos, the AMG is a little bit stronger, so that should be enjoyable. Anyway, give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave any comments in the comment section. Thanks again for watching, everyone.